The chief will be able to provide some details on the limited amount that we know thus far, and then I will provide some comments thereafter.
On a quiet morning in Minneapolis, while most of the city was still asleep, FBI and ICE agents raided a luxury residence in the heart of the city. More than 60 federal agents took part in the operation. Within minutes, the property was surrounded. But what made this raid unusual wasn't the size of the operation. It was the private home of the sitting mayor of Minneapolis. And as FBI and ICE agents began looking inside the residence, they allegedly discovered more than a ton of packaged narcotics, millions of dollars in assets, and records pointing to a network that stretched across multiple states. What began as a single raid would eventually lead to 52 arrests, more than 140 shell companies, and a financial network worth billions of dollars. And to understand how it all happened, we need to go back to the night it all started. The silent raid. Federal authorities had reportedly spent years building this case. Investigators reviewed thousands of financial transactions, analyzed digital communications, and tracked money movements across multiple states. And it all pointed to a single address in Minneapolis. The home belonged to Ayan Nur Hassan, the mayor of Minneapolis, and one of the most recognizable political figures in Minnesota. And after years of gathering evidence, federal authorities had finally decided to act. As the first light of day had yet to reach the streets of Minneapolis, unmarked federal vehicles began entering the neighborhood from multiple directions. The operation involved more than 60 agents from the FBI and ICE. Some were assigned to perimeter security. Others were part of entry teams. Additional personnel were responsible for evidence collection, digital forensics, and financial investigations. As vehicles moved into position, agents quietly spread throughout the area surrounding the residence. Within minutes, nearby streets had been secured. Observation points were established. Communication channels were rechecked. Every team knew exactly where it needed to be. The target was a luxury residence reportedly valued at more than $4.6 million. And according to investigators, years of investigative work had led directly to its front door. At approximately 4:21 a.m., the order was given. Entry teams moved toward the residence. The front door was breached. Agents entered and began clearing the property room by room. The ground floor was secured first, then the second. Bedrooms, hallways, offices, storage areas, and common spaces were checked as the operation moved forward according to plan. The entire residence was reportedly secured in less than 2 minutes. No resistance was reported. No attempt to flee was reported. Inside the master bedroom, agents detained Ayan Nur Hassan. For many operations, that would have been the end of the story. In this case, it was only the beginning. Because the objective was never just to make an arrest. Investigators believed the most important part of the operation was still ahead. By 4:29 a.m., the residence had officially been designated an active federal crime scene. Additional personnel began arriving almost immediately. Forensic specialists entered carrying evidence kits. Cyber investigators brought equipment for examining electronic devices. As the search expanded, sealed evidence containers began leaving rooms throughout the residence. Within the first 15 minutes alone, more than 12 evidence containers had reportedly been cataloged and taken out of the residence. And this was just the beginning. The hidden locker. Once the residence had been secured, the operation entered a completely different phase. The arrest was over. Now investigators needed to find out what was inside the $4.6 million property. At first glance, nothing appeared unusual. The house was clean, organized, quiet. There were no obvious signs of a large-scale criminal operation. In fact, Investigators later said that what stood out most wasn't the presence of drugs. It was the level of organization behind them. As agents continued processing evidence, the first major inventory report was completed. By approximately 5:55 a.m., more than 1.2 tons of packaged material had been cataloged inside the residence. Each package was individually sealed. Each was labeled. Each carried identification markings that investigators believed were connected to a larger distribution system. Preliminary field tests soon revealed what was inside. According to investigators, the packages contained cocaine and fentanyl, both at unusually high levels of purity. The cocaine alone reportedly weighed more than 900 kilograms. Federal analysts estimated that quantity could potentially be converted into millions of individual doses. But the amount wasn't what caught investigators' attention. It was the way everything had been arranged. Nothing appeared random. The packages weren't piled together or hidden in a hurry. As the search continued, agents noticed that one of the interior walls looked different from the others. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary, but its dimensions didn't match the surrounding structure. The measurements were slightly off, and scans indicated an unusual density behind the surface. Unlike a standard household safe, this locker had been built directly into the wall and concealed behind layers of drywall and paneling. Investigators now faced a new challenge. They had found the locker, but they still needed to get inside it, using specialized cutting tools and breaching equipment while preserving as much potential evidence as possible. What they found inside immediately changed the direction of the investigation. The locker contained multiple encrypted hard drives. Alongside them were 11 burner phones and additional electronic devices. The equipment was immediately seized and transferred for forensic examination. According to investigators, the hard drives contained more than 18,000 encrypted communications spanning nearly 8 years. Messages, call records, movement schedules, transfer instructions. Every entry was reportedly time-stamped and organized. Investigators also discovered records showing activity connected to multiple cities across the United States. At that point, the case was no longer about drugs alone. The evidence suggested investigators were looking at something much larger. A private residence, a hidden communication system, thousands of records, years of activity. By that point, investigators believed they were looking at something far larger than a local operation. This was no longer just a house, and it was no longer just a normal drug raid. It looked less like a storage location and more like the command center of a highly organized operation. And if that was what agents found inside a single property, then how large was this network actually? Breaking the encryption. By 6 a.m., investigators had already uncovered massive quantities of drugs, millions of dollars in cash, and a hidden communication system. But experienced federal agents knew those discoveries only answered part of the question. The cocaine explained the scale. The cash explained the money. Neither explained how an operation this large had allegedly remained active for nearly 7 years. The answer, investigators believed, was inside the encrypted hard drives recovered from the hidden locker. The devices were transferred to a secure federal command center, where cyber specialists immediately began working to access the data. Initially, analysts expected to find the usual things: contact lists, transaction records, routing information, maybe a few years of communications. But what they found left them wondering how this network stayed out for this long. At approximately 7:02 a.m., additional routes connected to major cities in the South, including Miami. Every route contained detailed information. Nothing appeared random. Everything appeared organized. The deeper investigators looked, the bigger the network became. Over the next hour, analysts reportedly identified more than 11,600 recorded shipments covering a period of nearly 7 years. Every shipment had been documented. Every delay had been recorded. Every route adjustment had been tracked. To investigators, it looked less like a criminal operation and more like the logistics system of a major transportation company. But the routes weren't the most important discovery. The system controlling them was. By approximately 8:15 a.m., analysts determined that the network could allegedly adapt in real time. Routes could be changed within minutes. Shipments could be redirected to alternative locations. If one route became unavailable, another could immediately replace it. The network had been designed to keep moving, and then investigators discovered the detail that connected everything back to the residence raided earlier that morning. According to analysts, the highest-level administrative access points within the system all traced back to a single location: the mayor's residence. At that moment, investigators realized this wasn't just a storage site. It was the location where this whole operation was being managed from. But controlling a network of this size requires huge sums of money. So who was actually paying for it? And where was all the money this system generated going to? The $3.2 billion empire. By early afternoon on the day of the raid, forensic accountants from multiple federal agencies began reviewing financial records recovered from the residence. At first glance, the documents looked ordinary: spreadsheets, invoices. But at approximately 11:18 a.m., investigators identified the first group of connected companies. The businesses operated under different names and in different states, but their transactions followed nearly identical patterns. Money moved at the same times, through the same types of accounts, using the same transfer structures. By 12:05 p.m., additional companies had been connected to the same activity. Then more and more. Over the next several hours, investigators reportedly uncovered a network of more than 140 shell companies. Some were registered as consulting firms. Others appeared to be real estate companies. Several operated as private investment businesses. On paper, they looked legitimate. According to investigators, most had few employees, limited operations, and little evidence of meaningful business activity. Instead, they appeared to function as financial intermediaries. Money would enter one company. As investigators continued tracing the transactions, the scale became clear. By evening, analysts estimated that approximately $3.2 billion had moved through the network over a period of nearly 7 years, and the money followed a very specific pattern. According to investigators, roughly $1.1 billion flowed through real estate transactions. Properties were allegedly purchased, held for a period of time, and then sold again. Each transaction created additional layers between the money and its original source. The paperwork appeared legitimate, but investigators alleged that many of the projects either never existed or were never completed. Donations were documented, tax filings were submitted, public records appeared compliant. Yet investigators believed those entities played a key role in moving money throughout the system. But what impressed investigators most wasn't the amount. It was the organization behind it. Every transfer had a record. Every payment had a timestamp. Every account appeared to serve a specific purpose. The deeper investigators looked, the fewer mistakes they found. One analyst reportedly described it in simple terms. This wasn't money being hidden. It was money being managed with a perfect system. But the money trail was only part of the story. The political connections. Up to this point, investigators believed they were looking at two connected systems: a drug trafficking network and a financial network. But as the investigation continued, a third layer began to emerge: the administrative records. While reviewing permits, inspections, property approvals, and municipal documents, some inspections were delayed during periods that investigators later linked to large shipment movements. Properties connected to shell companies appeared repeatedly throughout the records. And according to investigators, a number of those approvals, reviews, and administrative actions originated from offices connected to the mayor's administration. Individually, none of those decisions appeared unusual. A permit approval, a zoning review, a property authorization. Each document appeared properly filed. Each decision appeared to follow established procedures. Viewed on their own, they looked like ordinary government business. But investigators weren't looking at individual decisions anymore. They were looking at patterns. And when those records were compared against 7 years of shipment data, financial transactions, and communication logs, a different picture began to emerge. The same properties appeared repeatedly. The same companies appeared repeatedly. And the same administrative offices appeared repeatedly. According to investigators, the connections became increasingly difficult to ignore. This wasn't evidence of a single suspicious approval or a single questionable permit. It was a pattern that allegedly stretched across multiple years. Now, investigators were no longer asking how the network moved drugs or the money. Their main goal was how the operation had allegedly operated for nearly 7 years without significant disruption. And once the federal agents understood the scale of this operation, there was only one option left. They had to move against the entire network at once. The nationwide takedown. By 5:30 a.m. on the second day, the investigation entered its most decisive phase. What had started as a single silent raid on one property in Minneapolis had now expanded into a coordinated multi-state federal enforcement action across 3 states simultaneously. Inside secured command centers, final authorizations were signed. Timelines synchronized down to the minute. Field teams briefed with exact precision. At 6 a.m., operations launched everywhere at once. More than 900 federal agents from the FBI, ICE, and specialized financial crimes task forces moved against pre-identified targets. Offices tied to the network were entered without warning. Front companies were secured. Financial records were seized on the spot. By mid-morning, 52 individuals were in federal custody. According to investigators, those arrested represented multiple layers of the organization. Some were alleged distributors, others were coordinators, several were financial intermediaries. Additional individuals were connected to administrative and support functions within the network. But the arrests were only part of the operation. At 10:15 a.m., federal authorities initiated asset seizures on a scale rarely seen in a municipal corruption case. Bank accounts were frozen. Business licenses associated with front companies were suspended. By the end of the first full day of the nationwide operation, more than $780 million in assets had been seized or frozen. An additional $430 million in active transactions, money already in motion at the exact moment of the operation, was flagged and halted before completing transfer. For the first time in 7 years, the flow stopped. And the reason the operation worked so cleanly was something investigators had prepared for months. For federal authorities, it appeared to be the most successful phase of the entire investigation. But still, the same question remained. How did this network stay hidden for so long? And that was where the next phase of the investigation began. The questions that remain. When an investigation reaches this point, most people focus on the numbers. But for investigators, it was only the beginning. Because arrests don't answer all the questions. According to federal officials, additional indictments were already being prepared by the second day of the operation. Other individuals remained under investigation. Additional departments and records were still being reviewed. In other words, the investigation wasn't ending. It was growing. And that led to another question. If this network allegedly operated for nearly 7 years, how many people knew about it? Investigators had identified patterns in permits, approvals, inspections, and financial activity. But determining which decisions were intentional, which were negligent, and which were simply routine government actions would be far more complicated. That process could take years, and investigators would have to separate ordinary government activity from actions that may have helped the network continue operating. But perhaps the biggest question extended beyond Minneapolis itself. Because this story wasn't only about drugs, and it wasn't only about money. It was about systems. For years, investigators allege shipments moved through the network. Money moved through legitimate financial channels, and much of it happened without attracting significant public attention. So, how does an operation of this size continue functioning for years without being disrupted? By the second-day briefing, federal officials were still careful with their language. The investigation was ongoing. Additional findings were still being reviewed. But one conclusion became harder and harder to ignore. Criminal networks that move billions of dollars cannot survive through secrecy alone. They survive by finding ways to operate within systems that people already trust. And for investigators, that may have been the most important lesson of the entire case. A $3.2 billion operation, 140 shell companies, more than 11,000 shipments over 7 years, 52 arrests, and a mayor arrested before sunrise while the city was still asleep. And what's so surprising about this story is that all this wasn't happening in secret. It was operating all in plain sight for 7 years. So after hearing this story, what do you think? Was it just one case that slipped through the cracks of this system? Or does it show how corruption can sometimes exist inside the very systems people trust? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to see more stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.